Today's conversation is on Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion by Dr. Robert Cialdini. Interesting story about this book here from personal experience is I was very fascinated, and I still am, but I would actively research, study, and implement anything that I would find in the earlier stages of my entrepreneurial journey with respect to direct response marketing, consultative selling, and copywriting. And this book was one of my staples of study. So much so that when I was in bookstores, one of the things that I used to do was I would walk up to people in bookstores and I would talk about how we get to buying decisions. I saw it as a way of learning. So essentially, as I was applying it in my business, I was also talking about what I would learn with people. And they would ask me, they would say, how do you know these things? And I'd say, a book that was very helpful for me was Influence. And a number of times, actually, I took them over to the section where the book was. They ended up picking a copy up of the book and buying the book. And one of the reasons we could say that they would buy the book is I would mention that it was very helpful for me to learn about how I came to buying decisions, to learn about my own psychology so I could understand how I was being influenced, or so it appeared that way. See, I say it with a important consideration. We're the ones influencing ourselves. It just appears, let's say, that there's an outside influence. Once a person has conscious awareness, which Robert Cialdini discusses in his book, which is what I would like to explore with you today. So they would be fascinated by this. I mentioned that the book was not only helpful to facilitate harmonious business deals, sales, marketing, it was also very helpful to understand what was going on so that I could make better educated decisions. And this was one of his intentions of the book, was to share with the consumer what was going on, what was facilitating the decisions that they were making when they would purchase something. Thus, I would like to explore today this book from two perspectives. Number one is bringing awareness to what is going on within psychologically that results in buying decisions so that you can make better quality educated buying decisions. And number two, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a marketer, salesperson, how could you infuse these principles into your sales and marketing in a way that's mutually beneficial? Because that is ethical use of these principles. Mutual benefit would be one of them. He advocated for persuasion techniques to be used in ways that create value for all parties. For example, offering genuine benefits or truthful information rather than manipulating or deceiving. Transparency, number two. It involves being upfront about one's intentions. For example, and we're going to get into this, the scarcity principle. To highlight a genuinely limited product is ethical, but artificially creating scarcity to deceive people is not. He would also talk about and encourages in his ethical use education and empowerment. You have all the power to choose how you relate to whatever appears. So a person who is not aware of the beliefs in mind that is facilitating a buying decision, through a book like this, through conversation, through being aware, they can bring awareness to the particular beliefs that are triggered that result in particular decisions being made, which they may think they were consciously making those decisions, but yet they were facilitated through identification to particular beliefs. Long-term relationships is also what he encouraged through ethical use of these principles. He talked about ethical persuasion, building trust. So consider this for a moment. We're applying these principles whether we're aware of them or not in some shape or form. We can apply them in a way that facilitates harmonious business relationships. We can also, as a result of being aware of them, make better educated decisions so that we don't let's say, get triggered by a belief to make a decision that is not helpful for us. So although it wasn't a conscious decision, it was a decision that was resulting from identification to a particular belief. And the person may even think that they are making the conscious decision, when actually it was a sequence of events that resulted in that particular decision. Initially, when he wrote the book, and when I read it back in the days, it was 6 principles. And then later on, in the revised version, he added another one. So today we'll explore all 7 of them. And again, we're discussing it from 2 perspectives. I've never seen a video on YouTube or the internet discussing it from both perspectives. And having experienced also, as you have as well, a lot of buying decisions, and then doing it from the perspective of looking at it through the lens of what he shared, and also facilitating many millions of dollars in sales in building 3 successful businesses for myself, and also working with clients in a way that's mutually beneficial, considering what he had mentioned about ethical use of these principles. We can explore examples and have a wonderful conversation about these principles. Number 1 is reciprocity. So an individual may feel like they would like to give back after someone has shared something with them. Reciprocity. So an example would be the individual gives a free sample or some free information, and the person receiving the free sample or consuming the free information may then feel an interest to reciprocate by buying the product or service. So for example, if you go to a store and they give free samples, a person may make a decision without actually knowing. They may make a decision on buying the product or service based on the fact that they got a free sample. Now, they may not be aware of this. It's important to keep this in consideration. Why is this helpful? Well, for the consumer, it's helpful because then we can say that, okay, just because I'm getting a free sample here, it doesn't mean that this is the thing that I'm genuinely looking for. Although the free sample might actually be beneficial, I may get actual benefits out of this free sample. Then I'm interested in further, let's say, engaging in this particular business, buying what they're offering. And that's actually an educated decision, because by trying out the sample and gaining benefits from it, they may ask the question, what other benefits can I get by engaging with this business? So for example, in my IT business, what we would do is we would sometimes go over to the prospect's site where they would call us in and they would say, we have this challenge going on with our wireless network. We can't seem to have a stable connection in devices in this particular location in the office. So we would go over there and then we would find an easy fix, an easy solution, and we would solve it for them for free. Now, what they would then say is, thank you for doing that for us. What else do you offer? What other products or services that you offer? Or I may say, it was an easy fix. We fixed it for you. By the way, we also notice that you could benefit from patching your servers. Your servers haven't been patched for a while or something like that. Now, they had an opportunity to relate with us in a harmonious way by experiencing what it's like to work with us. And they also feel that we genuinely, as we do, have their best interests at heart. So we could have charged for that service, and sometimes we do. Yet this was an easy fix, so we were able to do it. And then it resulted in additional products and services that we offered to them, which they ended up buying, and it was a mutually harmonious relationship. Reciprocity. So it doesn't mean that they should or they must do business with us. It is an opportunity, reciprocity, for someone to try what it is that we're offering and seeing if it's a benefit for them. For example, on this channel, over the years, I've shared a lot of information with respect to what's going on within mind. I've also spoken about business. I've spoken about sales, marketing, operations, finance, leadership. And that information has been very helpful for many. And then they go on, if they're interested in doing so. There's no force, no strong arming. If they're interested, they may go over to, you may have done it yourself, you may go over to online training for entrepreneurs and see what else that we're offering. And I have my 5 programs there. You may purchase one of those 5 programs. Then what happens is you benefit greatly from those 5 programs, and then you may consider doing more business with me. Which brings me to my second point, commitment and consistency. So when one person commits to something, they can be more likely to commit to another thing in relation to that person or in relation to that business. For example, let's say in personal life, if a person commits to meeting up with you for coffee and they hang out with you and they have a wonderful time, they may commit to then hanging out with you again. Maybe if it's dating, it's a second date, third date, fourth date. Then it seems to become automatic that they automatically, through that consistency of commitment, find it easier to commit again and again and again. So, for example, someone signs a petition, someone is more likely to donate to the cause later. That's a great example. Someone signs a petition or they take a commitment to take one step to engage with that organization. They may find it easier to take the next step, the next step, the next step, or we could say the friction is reduced in that regard. Now, while this can be helpful with respect to harmonious relationships, the consumer is encouraged to, when they do take a step, to also evaluate each next step and to determine if that is the authentic next step. In other words, just because a person takes a step and they've consistently taken a step with a particular business doesn't mean that they should take all the steps that the business proposes. For example, when someone buys my programs, they may consider working with me one-on-one or joining Flow-Based Prosperity. If it is an ideal match, then wonderful. We can see reciprocity and commitment and consistency at play. Now, if it is not a match for them, I have no desire to force them, convince them, use these principles in a way that triggers them into that buying decision, because afterwards, they might not be happy with the service. And in business, we tend to see a lot of refunds with the companies that we consult with that use these practices in a force-based way, because there's buyer's remorse. Then there's a lot of refunds. I've even worked with industries that claim to have a particular amount of refunds as the norm. They may say, in our industry, 20% refunds is normal. That's what they say. Now, when I look at their marketing and we adjust their marketing in a way that's more aligned with the code of ethics that he had articulated, as well as the principles in a harmonious way, what happens is those refunds are reduced. What we have found universally is that those clients having a wonderful relationship with the business are more open to additional products and services and also refer people to them, friends, family, other businesses. And their numbers increase substantially on the back end. By that I mean, they had less refunds, thus they made more money there. And also, they ended up facilitating ongoing business from those clients. And then over the course, they made more money, simply put. So, it is helpful then to be aware of these principles as a consumer so that you can make educated decisions. And as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, consider incorporating these principles in a way that's actually mutually beneficial, that facilitates ongoing business, reduces refunds, and also people would go online and they would say, I had a lousy experience with this particular business and they overpromised and underdelivered, and they would write we could say negative reviews, and then that would actually result in less sales, because what would happen was people would go online and search for these products or services and look for the different kinds of experiences people were having from this particular entrepreneur or business owner or business. And they would read these reviews and they would then make their decision based on that. Now, while the actual product or service was actually beneficial, they were being denied from experiencing that benefit, you could say, because they were going by those reviews that were based on the client relationship of, we could say, over-promising and under-delivering kind of relationship with the client. And even though the actual product or service was beneficial, because the way it was marketed, it gave off a perception of it being a particular way, when in actuality it wasn't that way. And so now these reviews, we could say, distort the perception of the actual experience with the business. In other words, if they didn't, let's say, get outrageous with their claims, they would have actually gotten positive reviews, because they would not have raised the bar to a point of, let's say, not real results, and then delivered on what they committed to in the marketing, and they would have gotten positive reviews. And then what would have happened is those businesses would get more clients, because people would go and do a search, and that would actually facilitate the buying decision in a harmonious way. So they would get more business that way, which relates ideally to the next point, social proof. So consider this. A person, whether they're aware of it or not, may look to, for example, a business and see the reviews, the positive reviews or the volume of reviews, or if, let's say, if it's a person making content online like myself, and look at the amount of subscribers and then the amount of views. And then from there, without actually knowing that this is what's going on, based on volume, make a buying decision. Simply put, they may think, if other people are buying it or buying into a way of thinking, then that must be something that is helpful for me. Well, is it really? So as mentioned, he had released this book to educate the consumer. It's very helpful to ask ourselves the question, even though a lot of people are interested in this, is this something that is actually a benefit for me? Now, one of the ways that this can be applied in business in an ethical way is when a business actually grows to a point through cultivating harmonious relationships, through applying reciprocity, providing wonderful free information, free samples. People enjoy it. They make an educated decision based on the quality of the sample. And through the commitment and consistency of the clients going through the journey of building that relationship with the business, and the business building the relationship with the client with each thing that they commit to. So for example, practically speaking, we could say they commit to buying a service from us when I had my IT business to bring us in to patch their servers. Then after that, we offered them an ongoing managed services contract. And because they had wonderful results, first they got the free result of getting their wireless network issues resolved, and then they got the benefit of working with us and having their servers patched so they could be more secure, and having a wonderful relationship with them too, because part of it is how we go about facilitating that relationship with them and delivering on the service, considering quality, quantity, and spirit of service as articulated in Think and Grow Rich. Then what ends up happening is they say, you know what, we're interested in more business, doing more business with you because it benefits us, so we get more business. Now what ends up happening as a result of that is they tell people about us. They write great reviews about us. They speak in their organizations highly about us. And that is the social proof, the authentic social proof. More people talking about authentically the results that they get, and more people talking about the integrity as well. Because consider, it's the results, the integrity, the overall experience with the business during the marketing, during the sales process, during the facilitation of the service, and after. And there's no limit as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a business, to the degree we can optimize in these areas. So then what ends up happening is, because they're applying these principles in their marketing in an ethical way, so the business then goes on to distinguish themselves. The business goes on to educate the consumers about their buying decisions. They become as a trusted advisor to them. Very powerful. So now they're playing both roles. They're both educating the consumer, and they're also applying these principles into their marketing in a way that is mutually beneficial. And you can see how powerful that is. The next is liking. So generally, people tend to do business with those that they like. Now, even if they don't like the person initially in the beginning, they can, through the information, through the marketing, through the communication, through the relationship, develop a deeper relationship and like the person more. Now, just because we like someone doesn't mean that it is beneficial to take every recommendation that they give or every proposal that they give. Certainly, that is the case, for example, with what I share. If you have developed a relationship with me over the years and I make recommendations, I may say, do this or don't do that. Take a look at speed reading, quality, quantity, spirit of service in the Think and Grow Rich chapter that discusses that. Consider my 5 programs, being a member of Flow-Based Prosperity, one-on-one sessions with me, bringing me into your organization. You don't need to buy all those things. I recommend choosing what is actually helpful for you. And so even though we like someone or like a business, consider still that there are products and services that they offer that can be helpful for you, while there are products and services that are not for you. They're probably for another segment of the market, and that's fine. So rather than automatically saying yes to something and then afterwards buying it and then saying this is not for me because it was made on a, let's say, knee-jerk response, we can pause for a moment and ask ourselves the question, how does this relate to us ideally? How does this benefit us? How does this facilitate the kind of results that I am looking for? And is this a product that is actually helpful for me? Now, what ends up happening then through a business, if you look at this now from the business side, that builds more like, and there's many nuances that we could talk about with building liking, that kind of relationship with our prospects, with our clients. One of the areas that I like to focus on is integrity, being honest right up front. So not making any outrageous claims, as we discussed. Talking about the benefits that they can receive from applying the product to whatever they're going through, or the particular service, the benefits, and having an open, encouraging conversation of possibilities rather than a force-based conversation of trying to force them to buy products or service helps with the liking. So the way I like to look at this is these principles applied universally across the board during the stages of prospecting, during the stages of acquiring the client, and also during the stages of fulfillment, and also after fulfillment. So practically speaking, during the prospecting, which can include conversations, during putting out videos, for example, on YouTube or any kind of marketing information, it is helpful to build a relationship with the audience in a way where it doesn't separate ourselves. And the way we do this is through honesty, integrity, relatability, sharing personal experiences, not shaming and condemning the audience, understanding their challenges, their pains, their needs, their frustrations, etc., and having a conversation about it. And perhaps even creating more information, if it's related to the business, on those particular areas, and then delivering that information in a way that is facilitating that like. Now, what ends up happening then, you could say, like you more. And you like them as well, genuinely. It's mutual exchange. Then what ends up happening is if they reach out to you by email or would like to book a one-on-one session with you to explore working together, during that conversation, there's no force, there's no stress, there's no strong arming. I've been in consultative sales for many years. I recommend not strong arming, not forcing, not trying to convince the person. Because we found that companies that have a conversational approach, which is consultative selling, a good book to read is Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. The prospect actually has a wonderful experience with the sales professional, and that could result in the buying decision because they genuinely like the salesperson, as mentioned. The salesperson has their genuine interest at heart. And so that is also presented as commitment to the other person's vision, their outcome, and that is consistently delivered throughout the conversation. And through the reciprocity, we could say, of offering considerations, advice, and genuinely helping the person during the conversation, what we find is when the solutions are presented, here's what it could look like working with us, for example. We find the conversions go up because they genuinely enjoy having this conversation with the person. One could even say then the sales call, rather than being force-based, actually becomes therapeutic. And so what we found was the numbers went up. The conversion went up. Also, what ended up happening, as mentioned, the relationship continued to build. So now the prospect is having a wonderful relationship as they are enjoying the content being put out by the organization. And during the sales presentations, they're also having a wonderful experience. Now, when they commit to it, or we may say, here are some options, and we may customize the options to facilitate the sale rather than forcing them to buy a product or service. We create custom solutions that facilitates the sale. When that happens and they agree upon it, as soon as they agree upon it, process the payment, etc., we begin now the client relationship done with that same level of integrity and consistency. So rather than, let's say, treating them really well during the prospecting and then during the sales presentation, then afterwards, not treating them well after they gave you the money, we maintain that consistency all throughout. So you can see how all these principles relate harmoniously together. So then during the experience, and we can get into the nuances of this, for example, with the IT business, we would ensure that when we would show up onto the client's site, that we would show up in a way that would bring the flow to the office, to the organization. We would deliver on the service according to spec, and also we would do it in a way where there was a high degree of spirit of service during the client fulfillment, during the fulfillment of the product or service. So then the liking would develop further. The consistency, they would see it. Very powerful. And again, this then results naturally in social proof. How so? They would refer business to us. They would say, this organization did such a wonderful service for us that you can benefit greatly from it as well. I recommend working with Joseph. I recommend working with his team, etc. I have not had these kinds of experiences working with other IT firms. Now, this was when I had my IT business, same in my consulting practice, same in what we do now. And as mentioned, there's no limit to the degree we can optimize this area. There's no degree, we can say no limit to the degree we could optimize our innovation, sales, marketing, operations, finance, leadership. And one doesn't have to be perfect at it, let's say, to succeed tremendously. We continue optimizing on the journey. Business continues to grow. These principles are applied in a mutually beneficial way, the way Robert Cialdini had intended this information to be applied. The consumer is educated, as well as the business thrives. That's how we create harmonious relationships in business. Now, after the client experience, after the facilitation of the product or service, after that, we engage in ongoing communication with them. We may send them a few emails now and then. We may call them up to see how they're doing. And then we may propose additional products and services that could benefit them, and the relationship continues. Now, another point to discuss is authority. This is actually related to everything that we mentioned. People tend to acknowledge those that are credible, knowledgeable, and experts in their area. And a lot of times we find they make decisions based on that. Now, just because a person appears authoritative doesn't actually mean that you should buy what they're suggesting you should buy. That's what he's also pointing to. Consider that even if a person presents themselves as authoritative, you have the ability to choose if the product or service is beneficial for you. Now, when authentically and naturally and respectfully and from a place of integrity it's facilitated, a person naturally becomes authoritative. They become authoritative in their space because of their earnest desire to experience mastery in that area and facilitate masterful service. And so then what we find is clients and prospects go to this person, this individual, and they may ask them about how can they relate to particular challenges, frustrations. And these are all opportunities where we can create products and services and make recommendations. So they may say, I have this challenge. How do you relate to it? And I may say, well, I've experienced that challenge before. Or I have another client that has experienced that challenge before. And we came up with a solution, and it was helpful for me. It was helpful for them. Would you like to know about it? And they say, yes, tell me about it. So we have a conversation about it. And then that results in putting a deal together, and then we provide them that service. So you could say then they see me as an authoritative figure. Now, this is not pretending to be an authoritative figure. This is a natural result of applying everything we're talking about here. If a person is starting out a business, they have an opportunity to, from the foundation of starting out a business, infuse everything that we're talking about here. And again, this is based on my personal experience and working with thousands of businesses, building 3 successful businesses myself, and also working with thousands of businesses since 2009. I got into consulting in 2013, and even while I was running my IT business from 2009 to 13, I was still consulting with businesses, although more so on the IT side. We were talking about these areas. So having been exposed to so many different businesses and looking at results and looking at, let's say, lack of results, we see universally that when these principles are applied in a way that is beneficial for the consumer from a place of integrity, not only do they then get educated so they can make better decisions, if you have the product or service created, if your firm offers it, then you are the obvious choice and they want to work with you and the relationship continues. This is how we build lifelong relationships in business. Every one of my clients that I've had when I had my IT business, I could pick up the phone right now and call them. Some I haven't spoken to, actually many of them, in many years. Because let's say right now I'm focusing on these current initiatives. But if I call them up out of the blue, let's say, provided that the number hadn't changed, if I call them up out of the blue, we would engage in a conversation. How's it going? How's business? What are you up to? Maybe there's some ways we could work together. They would gladly meet up for coffee. They would gladly meet up for dinner. And so if we see that lifelong relationships, harmonious relationships can be cultivated right out of the gate, right from the beginning, then what happens is it opens up all kinds of possibilities and doors for you, ongoing, again, built on this sure foundation. Consider at a later point, for example, I could call up one of my vendors from the past, businesses that I've worked with, clients even, and engage in a new business opportunity, a new venture with them. All those doors are open and available through applying these principles in a mutually beneficial way. So that's authority. The next one is scarcity. Perceived scarcity boosts demand. Not necessarily with everyone, but there are people that through perceived scarcity, all of a sudden they desire to buy it. We could say because of scarcity, although they might not be aware of it. And what this means is, practically speaking, let's say if you go to a store and they say, we only have 500 of these available, and there are people that are on a waiting list to buy them. You can, if you would like, line up, and if, let's say, we're planning on getting maybe 100 or so more, you may get one of these. Now, if a person may hear that, even if though they necessarily didn't want to buy that to that level of urgency as before they heard this, they can, through that conversation, all of a sudden feel a higher level of urgency and then show up to line up to buy the product or service. And a way that I found to do this in a way that is mutually harmonious without creating fake scarcity or pretending like there's a limited amount is, again, applying all these principles in a holistic way. For example, recently, Danielle and I did an event in Los Angeles. You may be aware of that event. It was a wonderful event. We sold out. We had 35 spots available. We wanted 35 people there so we could facilitate accordingly. There were more people that would be interested in it, yet we chose to fill the seats of 35. So if you went to the website at a particular point, you would see that it said sold out. So what ends up happening then is that message is communicated that it's sold out, but not in a way that's manipulative. It was actually sold out. Could we have fit more people into the room? Absolutely, we could. Yet we chose to do it at 35 because we wanted to facilitate results in that volume of dynamic, because we wanted to create a very particular kind of experience for those that were there, and we did it. It was a wonderful experience for everyone. We got all wonderful testimonies, people emailing us and saying that they benefited greatly from that. So we can then, on our next event, announce that authentically. We sold out in our last event. Everyone benefited greatly. We're doing another event, and we're also doing it now for 35 people. Are you interested? So a person may then authentically say to themselves, so it's not fake scarcity, authentically, they may say, as I've done this before, perhaps I'll take this opportunity now. Think of it, for example, if you book to go to a restaurant and you call them up and they say, well, we don't have any availability for reservations tonight. And then you go and look at the reviews. Again, we're tying this all together. Now you go look at the reviews. They have great reviews. You ask friends and family about the place, and they're saying, wow, that is a great place. There's always a lineup there, and there's always no availability if you don't book 2 weeks in advance. And also, you've jumped on a call with them. You have checked out their website. And yeah, indeed, they have wonderful communication, harmonious relationship with their prospects. That's authentic. You like them. They are also, let's say, authoritative, because on their website, they may communicate about how they go about facilitating the experience for the guests. They may talk about the expertise of the chefs, etc. So you're like, wait, I like them. They're authoritative. Social proof. People are talking highly of them. The commitment and consistency is there because when I call them, they answer the phone, they return phone calls, they're responsive. Any question that I have, even if I say, what about this, what about that, they make recommendations. They may recommend, if you would like to have a particular kind of experience, then this particular table that we have that's facing the water, for example. Or if you're having a birthday, then we recommend this kind of food. Have you ever tried this? They may even talk about, for example, if you call them up and give explanations on how they go about sourcing what they're sourcing. And it's just an overall wonderful experience that you have with them, incorporating all these principles in there. And then through that, we could say authentic scarcity, which is actually authentic because it's not like they're pretending that there isn't enough space to host more guests. There's actually no space to host more guests. Then, I don't know about you, but I said, let's go to this place. This is a place that I would like to try. Now I want to try it even more, let's say. And that's fine. Perfectly fine. So I book in advance now. We're not going to go dinner there, but in a month from now, we're going to go and try this place and have dinner. So I'm going to book in advance. I'm going to take up some of their recommendations. Now, if I go there and I also have a wonderful experience like the other reviews, then I too am going to perhaps book again, tell people about the restaurants they're going to book, and then we see how authentically and legitimately they're incorporating all of it. Actually, use that as an example to articulate everything thus far. So they are offering reciprocity by sharing information, discussing with their guests that call in, etc. There's a commitment and consistency. There's also social proof with the reviews, people speaking highly, including from friends and family. You genuinely like them because they have a pleasing personality, as Napoleon Hill had articulated. They're a pleasure to have a conversation with on the phone. If there's any, let's say, issues with the reservations, they gladly accommodate. And they're authoritative. You ask them questions, they respond back. If they don't have the answer, they don't pretend like they know the answer and make up some things. What they do is they say, we'll get back to you about that, which is what we used to do in our IT business. I would always instruct my techs, I did this myself, if, let's say, you couldn't find an answer to a question that the client asked, don't make up or invent a solution that is not actually proven in an equation, just so that you can, let's say, people please, but rather say authentically, let me get back to you on that one. We'll look into it and get back to you. How about Friday? Or how about in a few hours? And then we can reconvene and we can come back with that solution. And so through being authoritative, the restaurant is booked, solid. And then what ends up happening is natural scarcity, authentic scarcity, we could say. It happens naturally if you have wonderful marketing, wonderful sales, wonderful operations, quality product or service that's being offered, and you deliver it in a wonderful way. Now, later on in his revised book, he added the unity principle. So he speaks about how people are more influenced a lot of times, and necessarily not always the case, because again, with this principle as well, we want to think for ourselves, really think for ourselves. And so he's both educating the consumer and also teaching how businesses can ethically apply persuasion to grow their business to benefit the consumers as well. People are more influenced by those whom which they share an identity or sense of belonging with. And this is totally fine. And again, not necessarily with everyone. For example, people might enjoy being around people that have commonalities, and then also like being around people that, say, don't have seeming commonalities, so we could value the differences in our ways of thinking, etc. Both is very helpful. But knowing that, can we create an experience that brings people together? A restaurant is a great example. One of the businesses that I worked with when I had my IT business, part of what I did was build these point-of-sale systems for restaurants. It was a bar/lounge/restaurant. Interesting configuration. So in there would be regulars that would come in, that would have dinner, they would have drinks, they would bring friends, they would meet new people, and they would also become friends. And now all of a sudden, this was a place to go to, which my friend had orchestrated masterfully, where there was a sense of unity, a sense of community. You know people from the local neighborhood. It was in downtown Toronto, Queen West area. There was, let's say, familiar faces at that particular location. And by encouraging this familiar place where we can meet, they would have some drinks, there would be a lounge, there would be some dancing, etc. And this diverse array of experience, and actually a space that would be very encouraging and inviting for people to connect with each other. One of the reasons why I found his bar, restaurant, lounge got really popular was a lot of people that were single would go there. So the way it was set up, very interesting. It was set up in a way that actually encourages meeting new people. The music was set up in a way where you could hear the conversations, yet it was loud enough to dance. The setup of the table and how everything was orchestrated was set up in a way by intention so that people could meet each other there, hang out with each other, make new friends. New relationships would start over there. It was a wonderful dynamic. As a matter of fact, I remember setting up a relationship with him where we did a revenue split because one night of the week he wasn't open. So I did a split with him for fun and revenue share. And I brought a bartender who's really popular in Toronto to the bar. We gave her all the tips. She invited all these people from the various places that she would bartend on her Facebook over to the event. We had a lot of people there. And it was a place where new people could meet, these communities would meet, and I would walk around, I would have conversations with people, and guess what? I ended up acquiring some IT clients from it as well. Unity principle. So if we can set up a campaign that sets up, let's say, a group identity. Again, I like to do it in a way that's mutually harmonious, no groupthink, distinct from groupthink. So the way we did it was people from outside of the communities that wouldn't normally hang out in this particular part of the city, we would find ways of bringing them in. So it wasn't like you would go to this particular bar and it was only people in the neighborhood. And if you were not from the neighborhood, you didn't feel welcome there. We were very intentional about that to facilitate unity in that regard. That's what we do, for example, in flow-based prosperity, is to encourage the different ways of thinking and then unify in conversation so that it's group coaching and masterminding without the groupthink. And how did everyone get to be a member of flow-based prosperity? Well, in this current business initiative that I'm involved with, I have incorporated all of these naturally and authentically, effortlessly, fun and flow-based, not in a manipulative way, into all that I have put out over the years, the products, the services, the videos, so that what ends up happening naturally is everyone unifies in that particular location and they're business owners, entrepreneurs, and their businesses are thriving and they're forming harmonious relationships with each other. There's a lot of business partnerships that were formed now as a result of flow-based prosperity, helping each other in a mutually harmonious way. So I recommend studying Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion by Dr. Robert Cialdini. Check out the later version that he had released, which includes the unity principle, and consider looking at it from two perspectives, which is very helpful for you, from the consumer perspective and also from the perspective of the entrepreneur. That way, by seeing it from both perspectives, we can apply this book the way it was intended to be applied, which is to facilitate harmonious relationships in the entrepreneurial and business space. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. You could say authentic business results are naturally from the premise of mutual harmony and unity, which plays out as quality, quantity, and spirit of service, which is shared, discussed, and encouraged in the marketing, in the sales, in the operations, and every aspect of the business to benefit everyone greatly. The clients, the prospects, the vendors, the team, everyone in the organization in mutual harmony and unity.